Welcome to the DevReady Podcast. On today's episode of the podcast, we've got Gareth from Friyay. Gareth has been on a previous episode, but I thought we'll bring him back on and just have an AI chat because he's someone that's in the space with a different perspective. Gareth, do you want to do a little quick intro and then we can dive back into madness?
Thanks for having me on, Anthony, and I think it's great. It's always great to come back. So Gareth, co-founder at Friyay. We're Australia's first generative AI studio, really focusing on small and medium businesses and helping them create assistants that help them grow their business and make more sales.
There's a couple YouTube videos where I've been getting some information from who do like a weekly recap. One is Matt Wolf, and the other one, I just found his name, which is Wes Roth. If you've ever seen those two on there, they do good weekly roundups, and one of them was playing with Manus a lot. So he's been doing tests. He's got like a standard test that he runs across all the models, and he was impressed with Manus to a point. So from what I mentioned, it's Claude 3.5 is what they said they've built it on. And they've got 29 tools underpinning it. So that'll be code writing, web searching, and then they've got a thing called browser use, which is what they do for the interactive web browser part. But what have your experience in that sort of space or in the tools at general and what you've seen since we spoke last year, I think it was, on the episode?
Yes. God, it's just amazing how quickly things, like when we spoke, any other time in history, not this much would have changed in what we talked about. But yeah, since we've spoken and what you're talking about then is, I don't like using the word agent, even though that's what they are, because 99% of the clients I speak to, agent is too much of a stretch now, the concept of that word.
Yep.
So anyway, but in absence of that is that what you're talking about, what we've seen is I think we're moving, and I think we may have even talked about this, is the sort of spending hours crafting the perfect, well-engineered, one-shot prompt. We're moving further and further away from that.
Yep,
and
definitely.
I think with Manus was a great example. And even Manus sort of, I think, poked OpenAI to move faster. And was it the beginning of this, end of last week, that OpenAI released their 4 sort of pre-built, somewhat already prompted, I'll use the word agent, but like browser use, similar thing, like web search, RAG.
Mm-hmm.
But using non-technical terms, it's where what we're seeing now is that spending less time really doing the prompt engineering and thinking about the context of where those plug and play solutions or agents can go into a workflow. So that's been a shift we found just in the last probably 3 weeks and a lot of offerings.
It's a very interesting time to try and keep on top of things and then refine offerings. Understand, all right, we both might wake up tomorrow and go, all right, half of what we do is no longer here because there's the new X, which is doing Y for us, and we don't have to do it. But the perfect prompt, I still see posts on LinkedIn where people are saying, here's the only prompt you're ever going to need, and those are just like bullshit, really. One prompt does not do anything for anyone, and it's not going to solve a problem for you. I'm sure you've seen this, that from our experience, it's still breaking it down into small pieces. It doesn't matter how you word it, as long as there's small enough tasks. Just like if you're talking to someone sitting next to you and you ask them to do something. You overload them,
exactly,
it's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think this is where, for the average person using ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, the messaging in the market is confused or convoluted. So when you read stuff separated into 2 things, there's using a tool like ChatGPT in your everyday use, in your work or personal life, and people that are building assistants for people. When there's a lot of conversation around prompt engineering and one shot and making sure assistants work reliably, put those content and stuff that you're reading in the bucket of people who are trying to build specific assistants.
Tools for it,
exactly. But for the average person, when you're thinking about using ChatGPT, think about it more now as a conversation and a collaboration, and less about, well, I've got to have all of this structure in my prompt, and more, I need your help to do this. Here's what I'm trying to do. And the extension of that is how much we've seen the improvement in the reasoning models.
Yep.
So O1 or O3 for ChatGPT and the other tools having them. But what that did really practically is it removed the need for chain of thought in your average person's prompt. And even chain of thought was somewhat complex, but if you were prompting ChatGPT previously and saying, think step by step, and here's the process I want you to follow, you don't need to do that anymore if you're using a reasoning model. You give the task and context, and you'll see it start to think through the process.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to just trying to read how its process is going. I know that they've hidden a lot of the actual reasoning from us, and so what they do is they provide a summary of the reasoning that actually is happening. I think that's either it's because it's like proprietary and it includes prompting and it might explain certain things or it might confuse the person. But doing that helps. You need, as a user, you just need to provide it less context potentially as well, because it can think through things like you mentioned. You don't need to tell it, do this and nothing else, or do this step and then wait for the next one and then we'll build it out. I still find value in having it ask me questions to provide context, because then I don't have to worry about the prompt or trying to remember what I need to tell it, where it will now make me think. And it may be a 20-minute exercise to answer those questions sometimes.
That's probably what you described, and that's probably the single most effective thing people can do right now with the tools when they're prompting is ask for questions back, or when you put in a request, ask the tool what it needs from you before it starts. Because the other thing I found that starts to do, so the other thing you can add there is give it permission to say it can't answer because it doesn't have the information it needs. That can also reduce your level of hallucination, because we think about these as really eager assistants who are trying to do their best job to answer your question, and they'll do it and sound really convincing even if they don't know the answer. So having something in your prompt around, if you don't have enough information to perform this task for me, please tell me. And that gives the model an out rather than just sort of making up sources or a very convincing answer.
Yeah, because for those people who are listening that don't know that, there are system prompts that you can provide AI. So when you're developing with them, we can provide system prompts that tell it you are a X and you're trying to help a user. So ChatGPT's one will be you're a chat agent that or AI that can help users. You aim to give them an answer and a positive experience, and then that's sort of drives every conversation it ever has. So telling it it can not answer goes against that, but gives you a better result because it's not just trying to please you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they do what I do, which is if you say something when you believe it, it sounds true.
Yes, very true. Yeah.
Yeah. So just before we started, you mentioned that you've shifted everything over to Google Workspaces from Windows 365. I think we shared a similar experience, but I'll let you explain yours and the reasoning there and what you went through.
And this is a big thing. So I'm 20 odd years into my career, and 20 years and a few months I've been on Microsoft. So shifting over to Google is a big thing. And we've moved everything at Friyay across to Google, the whole Google suite, away from Microsoft. And I am really honest, I don't get any kickbacks from Google at all. And I was a heavy Microsoft user. And we really tried to make Copilot work. And it's just a substandard product in our experience for what we were trying to do. And Google Gemini blows it out of the water, like really blows it out of the water. And specifically what I mean by that is we've moved across to Google Workspace. So Google Sheets, Google Docs, Calendar, Gmail, Google Meet. And the way so both Copilot and Gemini show up inside the various products. So Copilot was showing up inside Word, inside Excel. Same with Gemini. Gemini shows up as the Gemini symbol inside Google Sheets. It's chalk and cheese in terms of how these tools perform. So did the same tests with them over and over again. So a classic one is getting Copilot and Gemini to build a pretty basic table with some simple formulas and embedding it in a sheet or an Excel. It was like pulling teeth with Copilot. Whereas Gemini, I've got a project coming up. I need to do a very simple project plan table. Here's the requirements from the client about the project. This is what they need in their project tracking. Can you create this table for me? Bang. Here's the table. Click insert, and it's inside the Google Sheet. Just so seamless and easy. So I was curious, you're also sharing your experience.
Yeah. So mine's, I haven't tried to use it in the tools as much. I tried inside of Outlook. A bit of a poor experience. I wrote Very short email came in. I was just like, all right, generate with Copilot. And the response was just repeating that email. It wasn't responding to it. It was just an exact almost copy of what they said. So it's shit email, really. And then I haven't used it inside of Word or Excel because I haven't need to, but I use ChatGPT like an assistant to do data cleansing, organizing data, and then a lot of categorization type work. And I thought, all right, turn off my Plus GPT Plus subscription, move to Copilot because eventually I'll get the SharePoint integration turned on and I'll have access to all the documents. Started using the Copilot chat. I think I survived 3 different conversations, and then I turned back on ChatGPT Plus and gave that license to someone else to test. It was just terrible experience. It says it's GPT 4.0 underneath the hood, but it doesn't work the same. I was expecting the chat interface to operate exactly the same because it's the same model. They've invested in it. They host it itself. So the hosted models that we use in our development work perfectly. It hasn't got a problem. But that version of Copilot chat was terrible. It just couldn't solve the answer, couldn't do the data processing for me. It was quite bad.
And that's what I find so bizarre because something's happened in how it's being integrated, because I was exactly the same. I was like, oh, it's powered by OpenAI, perfect. More secure, perfect. But it's like some layers in, I don't know, I'd be speculating, I don't know enough about Microsoft, but it feels like such a missed opportunity,
Well, they've got all your data already, so it should just be figuring out how to turn it on and make it work like Google has.
Yes, and we have the same, like so many of our clients, their first step was to switch on Copilot, and they were like, great. And then the conversations we have with them, they're just tearing their hair out. They're like, it's just not what we expected. It's not working. What do I do? Like it is just not working for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just really keen. I'm hoping that Microsoft gets their act together and improve. Just like Google, what was at the end of third quarter last year, they kept tripping over themselves and making some catastrophic errors with Bard and then Gemini, and all of a sudden they seem to have got their stuff together and fix the issues, and now Gemini is a fantastic product.
Yeah, I just frequently test between Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT for certain. All right, go look at this website and give me a SEO optimization or what keywords are being used or how do I improve landing pages. We do a bit of the marketing side, and they each have their different strengths in doing that sort of stuff. But it's always good to understand where they are at a playing field and see that now they're equivalent. Whereas Google and the image generation was a big problem before. And then with Bard, the very first versions weren't as good as ChatGPT, but now you're at a different level.
Yep. I'm still finding though, because people ask me, and we pay for all the tools. No one needs to pay for all the tools unless they're sort of in your and my position when they're building for clients. ChatGPT is probably my 90% of the time go-to. So if I've got someone sitting next to me in the office and I'm spinning my chair around and getting help collaborating on something, I'm going to ChatGPT. But if I'm jumping into any of the Google tools and having to work in a spreadsheet or
then you've got those
doc, I'm using Gemini. And then coding is all Claude. Like I'd be curious because you're probably a much heavier user or much more. What's your experience?
I've been into the last, say, 3 weeks, really gotten into Claude and Klein. So I'm on the couch again. I'm with the laptop testing and working on stuff. It's helping a lot of generation. So yesterday I was in a meeting, having access to the meeting, and then all right, do this, Claude, on the side. And it's there, and you spent 20 cents, and you've got 14 code files ready to go. And Cursor with Clyde doesn't make as many errors. So the code that comes back is relatively good. It works. It's not bloated. And I've had to do very little fixes in the small projects that I've tested so far. Then the other one that we've been playing with is called Kleinbot. So it's an extension to Visual Studio Code or in Cursor as well. You can have both of them running together. And that works directly through with an Anthropic API key. And you can do the similar thing, bit more pricier because it's not going through the Cursor servers and they haven't got the extra level of like prompt engineering on top to control it. So you need to have more control over the Klein one. But I've ran the exact same 4 prompts for one product in both of them at the same time. I ran out of tokens in Cursor. In Klein, I hit the rate limit. Then the next one was one of them got stuck and it just sat there spinning for about an hour before I realized that I wasn't doing anything. I just thought it's a lot of processing, and then so I close it down, shut it down, restart, and get it going again, and then it was fine. It started working. But there was, in those tools, for people who don't know how to code, great way to get something going. But you will have problems if you don't understand the basics of coding or understand how to put things together, because you'll get an error and it'll be a one-line fix, but you'll tell it to fix that error, and they're like, okay, I'll go and refactor the entire project and touch every single file to change one line of code. And then one round was, so when I prompted, I'm not giving it like a one-shot where it's build me an entire system that does X. It's okay, set up this framework. Now add this page. Now from this page, extend it to this, and now do this and this. So it's step by step, which is how I would implement it to begin with. The third step was tell it to do something. So it took something away that it did in step 2. And then I had to tell it to bring it back because I didn't know where it was because I didn't write the code. It was easier for it to tell it where to do it. Then you look at the changes. It was one line that it removed and it put back. But I don't know why I did that. So it's an interesting journey, that one, but it's definitely speeds up development. But I think you need to know how to develop to get the best out of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I'm not a developer by background, and that's why it's really good hearing your perspective, because there's so much being said now. Vibe coding is just everywhere at the moment. You had what the Anthropic CEO 2 weeks ago said, within 3 months, 90% of code is going to be written by AI. And obviously that created a big stir. Like you had,
of course,
there's a big chunk of people who are saying, oh, that's impossible. Humans are always going to be writing code. There are other people that are saying, well, it's already writing 100% of our code. Because you've got the most experience in that space, what's your take on that?
It can write all the code. It doesn't mean the code's going to be right as well. So I don't think we'll take people out of the space. It should allow us to get through projects faster and be able to deliver more value to people, and then be able to get through more projects. Or you can go the other way and go, all right, you can cut resources and get through the same amount of work with less people. I'd provide more value, and if you can go above and beyond with the same effort, it doesn't make a difference to us. So it's not about trying to get the most out of the margins in that respect. 90% of code, it probably can do that, because a lot of code that you have to write, if you're not at like the bleeding edge or the deep tech side, you are just writing, query a database, filter some data, bring it back. All right, then objects change properties or change state, write that back to the database. Getting to the point where you're creating games, you can. I think Elon Musk said that X is set up a game studio now, so they're setting up an AI game studio that Grok is going to be helping them create games. So definitely something you can do there, as long as you've got the integration with the Unity or the 3D tools correctly. The biggest challenge I see is, as a developer, you would always used to go to Stack Overflow to find help where someone has tried to do something you're doing at the moment. You don't know how to do it, so you go there and you see what people are suggesting, you get their feedback. In the last 6 to 8 weeks of me doing a lot more development with AI and trying to understand this stuff, I can't find answers for those questions. So people aren't going to those tools to put feedback and help you. The AI is trying to solve it all. So I think there's going to be a problem there with, if you're not a analytical thinker or you understand how to code well enough, you'll end up having trouble trying to solve problems, because now you don't have that extra information. And the AI doesn't necessarily know how to create new per se, because they're doing the autocomplete model. So if it hasn't been written before, they won't know how to write it. And I think that's where the biggest change, where you'll always have people.
Yes. And I think that's really interesting, because it's restructuring what already exists. When I look at it not from a developer side, coming from sort of a business design, business analyst side, one of the hypotheses we have is that developers can become product people if they want, but also the flip is true, is that a business analyst can now be a product builder with the right understanding of how to use these tools. Because I always think about previous experience in the banks is you'd have transformation projects or digital transformation or any sort of digital project or product build. You'd have your business analyst scurrying off in the business, getting the business requirements. And then you'd have maybe your agile people in the middle. then you have your devs, and then it'd be about translating it all, and you meet somewhere in the middle because the dev would do the building off the back of the business requirements. Is that I think some really smart, so that if you're a business analyst and you're trying this now, you're going to put yourself in a really good spot because I've even chatted to a few BAs that are inside some of the big banks, and not that they're doing it inside their business, but on the side, is they're like, I can now build a product, have it live, launched and tested, to your point, that small scale,
you can
based on their knowledge of
a prototype or
understanding
something
a requirement,
Yep.
and then being able to pull from that help in that sense. So that's going to be a really interesting time because, I agree, it's has the potential to create this super clump of product owners and builders.
Yep.
And I think even a product owner, that definition probably needs to change now to what it used to be.
I think the biggest change in that space is going to be that's like the bubble and the no-code drag and drop coding tools. We'll probably start seeing a decline because you don't need to know how to do that. You don't need to know how to code anymore. And that was like an abstraction to coding for people. But you still had to learn how to use those tools, and they had their own challenges where people had to spend 3 to 6 months learning how to connect a bubble interface to a database and how to filter data.
Yep.
That's completely gone. And I don't know where they're at with AI and whether they're just getting AI to do their connections for them in their platform or people just bypassing that now and going to Claude. We've got clients that are taking the code base that we're working on with them, and it's like, all right, I've got ideas. I can now rapidly prototype an idea and give you an idea of what I'm thinking about. And now we can then take that and then implement it and improve it.
Yeah. Well, that example just is 2 weeks ago, we've switched off Bubble.
Yep.
Is it exactly your point? Is that we don't need it. We generally don't, because we're using it in the context of a lot of proof of concepts, because it's just a really easy way to spin something up and then a client can interact with it. And really, really simple is you'd have a good, well-designed assistant in any of the platforms, and then through an API call shows up in Bubble. We just don't need Bubble anymore.
Yep.
We create inside Cursor with access to Sonnet 3.7, do all the building there, does all the connections to the assistant. We have a fully built solution ready to go. But that was spot on. And I if I was in those companies like Bubble, they probably got, unless they really innovate and change. I know we are probably at the bleeding edge of stuff, but have they got more than 6 months of their current solution before everyone cottons onto it?
Really?
I'm
not sure.
so.
Because, like I mentioned, it takes a long time to understand how to put one of those together if you're not technical or you haven't spent the time to play with the tool.
Yep.
And with Sonnet 3.7, you actually get very good, well-structured code that's not bloated.
Yeah.
So in one of those podcasts that I mentioned earlier, I can't remember which one it was, they mentioned that the reports from Anthropic on 3.7 was in global competitive coding rankings, Claude 3.7 was now the 157th best ranked coder, when I think 3.3 was the millionth coder.
Wow.
Out of roughly 35 million developers that are around the world, that not everyone participates in those competitions, but it went from the millionth to like the 100,000th to the 175th.
That's insane.
Whatever the next release is, whether it's in the top 10 or it is the best, that's where the 90% of code will be written from, is by that model.
Yeah. That's just nuts. And then on that point, I'm curious to get, because vibe coding is like the phrase at the moment. Over the last couple of weeks, everyone's saying, I've been vibe coding. Are you hearing that? Questions from your clients?
I haven't heard that phrase yet. So is that just coding with AI?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah,
and
I haven't heard it. I had a comment from a client yesterday saying, so how much of your code's written by AI? Are you guys writing anything anymore? I think people just assume that the AI can do everything for you. Yeah. It's still not. I still wouldn't give it over to everything because, like I mentioned, it gets confused, it gets stuck, and it can cause more problems as well because you get stuck trying to solve things that it's undoing for you. But it's an interesting. I haven't heard it from. I haven't heard that exact phrase, but the question's being asked. Yeah,
and it's because we get it, and I suppose you could argue that we're doing a bit of vibe coding because it's that ability to communicate in natural language. Yep. Keeping, say, Claude on a tight leash. So that it focuses on one task at a time, but there's that's a lot of what I'm seeing a lot of content coming out around. I've been over the weekend I was doing some vibe coding and I've created this app or I've created this game. Do you want to play it? Type of thing. So that's going to be. I'm following that and seeing where that's going to go as well. But I just see it as such a great opportunity to. So I agree. There's risks and challenges, and you spot on around. It's using what's already been done and repurposing it. Might consolidate a lot of roles, but also could create opportunity for a lot of people who had great ideas can now unleash those ideas to a certain point because they weren't restricted by their own capability.
In that space, it'll probably change the metric for what funding looks like for a startup.
Yeah.
Because it's no longer an idea or a prototype. It's you have to have something that is on the market, and then you need 2 or 3 people only, not a large injection of cash to then be able to build a team.
Oh,
and if you're not doing it that way, or you don't have a suite of agents supporting you in the business to do stuff, then you're not going to get funded potentially. Like it'll shift a lot.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect the shift to coding this fast or this abrupt to happen. That's been a surprise. But the one thing I have probably kept in mind as that's been happening is, all right, there's 35 million developers around the world. A lot of the markets, say the Philippines, Vietnam, India, Ukraine, where people go because it's cheaper offshore than onshore. Are those markets just going to get really affected because now the cost of development is so much cheaper that you won't need to go to those markets because you can get a developer here or anywhere else with one of these tools who can now do 4 or 5 times the amount of work. So it's not worth going overseas potentially and continually getting the wrong thing done, because that's a lot of people's experience, faster. And then having to iterate a lot faster and getting it wrong. I don't know if that's going to be a huge problem coming in the next few years with those markets, because that's an entire industry getting decimated almost.
Yeah, that is. But it's also interesting. That's a really interesting way to think about it, because it's now giving a competitive advantage to those in the traditional, more developed markets, if they can prove, and well, they absolutely can do 5, 10, 15 times more.
Yep.
So their rate is a lot more worth it.
Yep.
A lot more worth it, and you're de-risking it as well. That's a really good point.
And then if you think about, say, just India, because that's the biggest one with probably a number of chairs, bodies in seats actually doing development.
Yeah.
Say they have 10 million developers. How many of those that are working day to day actually have the capacity to look at these tools, because they're on such a low rate that they're just given tasks and they just have to do it. So they won't even be keeping up with this. It's all an assumption and what I'm thinking is going to happen, because I hear stories from people that are saying, like, all right, in those companies, someone who might go out to lunch, they'll get poached by another development company at lunchtime, and then when they go back to after the lunch, they're at the new company. Like it just chops and changes that much, because it's just based on you giving me an extra 20 cents an hour, so I'm moving.
Wow.
Look, they're not going to be looking at these tools, I don't think, because it's the whole business model is based on bodies.
Yep. Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think that goes back to I'm still surprised, despite everything I read and hear and see, there are still a significant chunk of the population that aren't learning and aren't spending time in the tools. But I get it now. My view is I always try and empathize, because I'm in an incredibly privileged position, because I'm in the tools 7 days a week.
Yep.
And I'm getting paid to do that. I put myself back in my shoes when I was in the banking industry. I had a full-time job. So being able to squeeze in the learning is going to be a challenge. So I get that for a lot of people.
You have to do it in your own time. It's not part of your job, so you won't focus on it.
Yeah.
But now, as a business owner, you're probably spending more of your own time doing this stuff outside of your work time. That's what I find.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that maybe that's the ingredient for people. I had a really good conversation with a person in commercial banking yesterday, and he he sees the opportunity in that space and is really getting into it. And we were just talking about, well, your day-to-day is so flat out. Start experimenting with the tools in your personal time. And even that sounds hard. So the language that I try and say to people is get a free ChatGPT account or a free Claude account, or pay the $32 a month.
Yep.
And over the next month, on a Saturday and Sunday, find 2 things on the Saturday and Sunday that you have to do life admin stuff, like writing a shopping list, thinking about dinner ideas, organizing the kids' sport over the weekend, and ask that tool how it might help, because that's how you can start. Acknowledging that Monday to Friday you're at work and you've got stuff to do and you can't context switch, but you do that for a month, and say if you've done that, over the 2 days or a month, that's 8 experiments you've run with these tools, and that's the starting point. And most people, when they start doing that, then they go, okay, now I can find one task during the week for me to start, implementing this tool and then building that way. Because I get it, people are busy and life, it's like Homer. I always think of Homer Simpson. I was a big Simpsons fan. He's like, if I learn something new, it pushes something that I already knew out of my brain. It's kind of like...
It's hard to keep up and understand what you need to learn. But like you mentioned, you say the word personal time and people think they're losing something. Now I have to go work again in my own time. But thinking about how to use it can be overwhelming if you're not in the space and you don't know what's possible. I get a lot of people going, oh, you heard about this, like you're in IT, you must know about AI. I'm like, yeah. And then I open up ChatGPT and just do what business are you in? Okay, here's a marketing campaign for your business. Like just really small examples that blow everyone away because they don't understand what it's actually capable of. And I don't think we probably really don't understand what it's capable of either. We're all using it in very small, fine-grained things as well. Yep.
That marketing campaign one is a really good one. So for small businesses in particular, so I was helping out a small business that runs a really good swim school up here on the Gold Coast. And I was showing the owner, she's an incredible person, a lot on her plate. And they've got their branded van, so the van they get around in. And she was like, oh, I just don't know where to start and how to do this. So I said, we walked over to her van in the car park. I opened up ChatGPT and took a picture of her van and started there and said, here's the van for our business. To your point, where might I start in terms of marketing campaign? And that for her, she was like, wow. So if you've got a small business and you've got a work truck and it's got some advertising on it, take a picture of your work truck and ask ChatGPT as a starting point how you might enhance the advertising of your business just from that picture and see what comes back and start to build on that, because that's a really good place to start.
It's giving it context just in a different way. And then as a small business owner, you need to do these tasks, but you don't have the capacity to think about it or learn. And now you've got an assistant that can help you. For
absolutely
3-4 days worth of coffees in a month. It's not much.
Yes, and it's a tax deduction as well.
And if you use it and get the value out of it, it's not a problem. Like I mentioned before in that meeting, I think it was 20 cents or 80 cents it cost to run the model to generate code for me, but I had 20 code files written without me having to do anything. That 20 cents or 80 cents, even if that was $40 in time, that's completely worth it.
Yes. Yeah. What do you think that's going to do? Because that's a great example of, because that's just 1/100th or 1,000th of the cost you'd normally. As more people are doing that, what do you think that's going to do to development and pricing of actually dev roles?
Already, another client was asking, so is it cheaper now because of AI? It doesn't write all the code. We still have to do everything, but it's not. It will commoditize it and it's going to drive the price down, but you still need the right people to plan. So I think it's all about planning, which is where the DevReady concept was. It's plan the product first and then build it. Because even if you go to the chat models or to Claude or whatever it may be and start talking to it about building an app, I can't imagine how many times you're going to have to go back and forwards and tell it to do things once you've thought of them, or you haven't thought of them, and then to get it correct, and then go back and forwards and it's undoing stuff and redoing stuff and becomes spaghetti at the end. For now.
That's such a good point. That's what we found. We made about planning, where we found most success with Claude inside Cursor when we're building products is we need to have a view of what the end looks like. And then we always have that in our mind, or we visualize it, we've sketched it or conceptualized it, and then we use that to guide Claude. When we didn't at the start, we were just starting with a blank sheet, and you're right, it was going down rabbit holes, and we were struggling to pull it back because we're like pulling it back for what, and we're having to try and think what the end is. So I'd recommend to people, if you start trying, say, Claude inside Cursor, and you're not the experience that you guys have, picture what the end product might look like.
Yep.
Have that, and then guide it towards it and break it out into chunks.
It has to be chunks. It's the way you do anything. You don't build a house with trying to put the plaster on empty walls. Like, you could build the frame, put the slab. Like, everything is step by step. And if you can approach it that way, you'll get a better result than trying to say, build me a house. Because if you say that to a builder or an architect, you're going to get two different responses.
Yeah.
And they're not going to both of them aren't going to look like what you wanted.
That's a good point. That, like, build a house one's a good example for, say, if someone's using ChatGPT, you wouldn't go to a builder, build my house.
Yeah.
What would you ask first? Apply that same logic to, you want an outcome from ChatGPT or a Claude. What's the first thing you might ask?
Yeah,
and then have it as a conversation.
That methodical approach to just trying to understand the problem state and the context to be able to figure it out. So, build me a house. Okay. What sort of house would you like? How many levels? How many bedrooms? What sort of furnishings would you want? And then start putting together. And here's 3,000 possible combinations of those room configurations. You'll get overwhelmed by this, probably the amount of responses it can come up with versus an architect in the same amount of time. But that's how you approach it. Because you say just build me a house. Well, that doesn't mean anything. It's too broad. And that's what we used to get with people with software. It's like, here's an idea on a napkin. How much is this going to cost? I can't tell you. You can try and build it now if you wanted, but you're not going to get anywhere close to what you actually want because there's no one guiding you along the way. You don't understand what you don't know about building software or how to build it the right way. But that will be a good prototype or a starting point to hand to the team and go, this is a vision of what I want. Let's figure out what it's going to actually look like. And now what does it take to get it to a level where it can be scalable or something I can work with to get it to where it needs to be.
That's something, that vision point is pretty cool. We experimented with this yesterday because inside Cursor, when we select Claude Sonnet, we notice there's a little button to upload images.
Yep.
We've started taking pictures of our straw man wireframes that we've been sketching out on our notebooks and using that, not as in start building, but here's what we're imagining. Let's work together step by step. Where should we start? Do you have questions for me? That seems to have helped us really well. And we've taken screen grabs of our existing sort of websites or apps and said, we're starting from here, but we want to try and do this in this. So here's the frame of what you need to build within. And that seems to help really well because then the model checks in and goes through steps and it helps us keep it on a tighter leash, we found.
Yeah, it's controlling it so it doesn't deviate too far off the path because it could go anywhere. And if you let it in one of the like agent modes, it can just go and do its own thing. If you haven't set up the parameters properly or built in enough gates. Those are where it can probably get a bit tricky because it can just, depending on how many things the agent is allowed to do, it could do all of them and you might not want it to. So it's a bit interesting, that spot. I think one of the other best uses for us is not even in the coding side, but it's in the planning. So I've had a few workshops with the team where we're talking a discussion and then we've got shared screen with ChatGPT on O3 Mini, so the reasoning model, saying, all right, we're discussing our conversation, we're having a thing, all right, now this is what we're thinking, this is the approach, these are the problems. What risks are there? What problems could happen? What's an alternate approach to this? So we've got a third person in the meeting with us working through it. And then it's like, all right, here it is. All right, we'll go with this, this, and this. And our initial constraint is still correct. Start documenting that. By the end of an hour and a half workshop, we've got a 20-page document outlining the whole process, all the different states, the features, and what has to happen. Where that would have been 4 or 5 days of work at a minimum just to get to that level of planning and detail and thinking through everything. That's been the best use case. It's an extra person in the meeting. I haven't found a way to integrate it into Teams where it can just be part of the discussion yet. But I don't know if they're at that point where it can sit there and wait for you to tell it what to do properly or not. Copilot's not going to do it, so.
I found I've been playing around with voice mode at the moment, just because the way it's been built in the one that's available to the public, it's very one directional, one voice.
Yep.
Because we've added ChatGPT voice to some meetings and it doesn't work because multiple voices.
It gets confused.
I even tried where I said to it, I just want you to listen. There will be multiple people talking. You'll only respond when there's a 10-second pause. But that didn't that didn't quite work. What we've done as a bit of a hack is we have Otter in those sessions.
You get the transcript.
Yeah, and then the transcript, we package the transcript with a task above it, which we might give to ChatGPT, or we even ask Otter to refine ready for integration with ChatGPT.
Okay.
So we have the meeting.
Yep.
Otter takes the transcript. Then we brief Otter what the next step is going to be and how we're going to use ChatGPT. And then we say what we need you to do is prepare the outputs from this transcript in a format that's going to work for ChatGPT, and then it'll go and then we just paste it in. So it's a little bit of a hacky approach.
I've done similar things like that, where I actually take the transcript file that it generates and just upload that straight to ChatGPT and go, all right, this is the meeting. These are the actual notes I took by hand. Expand all of my notes from the transcript. So I give it like a plan. So it's still a similar thing. Give it the context so it knows what to do. But it does get confused in those meetings where we go do face-to-face meetings. I'll turn on Teams and record the meeting myself. But then there's 9 people talking and I'm the only speaker in the transcript.
Oh, so what's that? So you have people in
So we have
room?
a face-to-face workshop in the meeting room.
Yeah.
But I'll have teams going and recording the meeting so we can get the recording so we can listen back to it.
Yeah.
But then there's only one person talking in the transcript, but there's 9 people in there, physical in the room.
That's where what we do there is we have, if we're face-to-face, we open Otter on our mobile.
Yep.
Because it's much better at distinguishing different speakers.
I hadn't thought of that. Because, we do screen sharing and stuff. We record the whole thing to watch
exactly.
over.
And a little hack we do as well at the beginning is we say, we get people to introduce themselves one by one. So, hi, it's Gareth. I'm the first person talking. And then it says, hi, I'm John. I'm the second person. Because then when we go to the Otter transcript, it has speaker 1, 2, 3. And then I say to Otter, just so you know, speaker 1 is Gareth, speaker 2 is John, speaker 3 is Mary. And then from then on, when I'm asking it, it associates the number it has with the name I've given it. Okay, and that's a good way to identify
should look back
people.
at Otter. We've been Fireflies and Read is what we've been testing on the most.
Fireflies is just as good though. You can do that same flow can work with Fireflies, but just if you've got Fireflies on your app on your mobile, just open your mobile and have Fireflies sitting in those conversations.
Okay.
Way better transcript than Teams will give you.
Yep. Okay. We'll jump back into that one then. Where do you see anything coming in the next couple of weeks, if anything, of what you've been seeing around from people or online with where we're going? We probably have another one of these podcasts in another month or so and recap on what we've just talked about. But
yeah, probably.
what
That'd be awesome to do, actually.
On the way or moving forward, anything that you've heard or seen or excited to try?
The thing we're trying at the moment is those pre-built plug-and-play agents to see if it speeds up the process. The most obvious, easiest opportunity for most people, which I think most people should be jumping on if they're building in the OpenAI playground, is use the RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation agent in there because you're not faffing with the prompts. My hypothesis, I think, in the next couple of weeks is way more models coming out of China. Way more open-sourced models, which will force the other big US players to push their releases forward. And then my sort of cynical hypothesis is that it'll cause more bugs it'll just be half-baked releases coming out.
Yeah, probably.
And a few more errors, but I think, and there'll still be the small percentage that are at the forefront, but the average person just maintain the rage and just play with one tool. Get used to one tool, ignore the noise. If you're working with ChatGPT a couple of days a week or Gemini a couple of days a week, that's the best thing you can do right now. There'll be lots and lots of fancy demos and everything coming out, but the 1% of people find those people and they'll be able to explain all the other details to you. But you can get away a lot with ChatGPT.
Just get a ChatGPT app on your phone, the free one, even, or the Gemini, and just have an idea, ask it a question. It's simple as that. I don't think the integration in the Galaxy AI or the Apple Intelligence, the AI, are any good. No one needs a summary of an SMS message. They're already short enough. Yeah. But just play with those apps and just play with it. You'll be surprised. I still get surprised every time I tell it to do something. Mm-hmm. You get surprised with the coding tools because you don't know how far it can go or an approach that you haven't thought of to do as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I like that. Start with a question.
Yep.
See where it can help.
Well, Gareth, it's been a great chat. Haven't had too many of these actually, just back and forth discussions with someone from the non-technical side on these tools. I'm sure there's been plenty of little nuggets and gold there for people to listen to. If anyone wants to reach out and find out more about yourself and Friyay, how can they do that?
Gareth at Friyay.ai, or look me up on LinkedIn. Try and put a lot of free tips and tricks of the experience we're having up on LinkedIn. So just Gareth Rydon, Rydon, on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And yeah, we'll put those in the notes like last time. Well, Gareth, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for jumping on. And we'll probably do another one of these maybe in another month or so, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks, Anthony.
Bye.